the knife pressed against her throat in broad daylight as dozens of people walked past. The robber thought he had found an easy target, a small woman carrying an expensive purse. 1 minute later, he was unconscious on the sidewalk, and Lieutenant Sarah Chen was explaining to paramedics why his shoulder was dislocated. What happens when a career criminal picks the wrong victim? This is the story of a routine robbery that became a masterclass in why you should never judge someone by their appearance. Lieutenant Sarah Chen stepped out of the downtown Seattle coffee shop at exactly 2:15 p.m., her favorite vanilla latte warming her hands against the October chill. At 5 feet 4 inches and 125 pounds, she looked like any other young professional heading back to work after a lunch break. The navy blue business suit she wore hid the lean muscle built through years of Navy SEAL training. Her black hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail that concealed the scar running along her hairline, a souvenir from a night operation in Somalia that had gone sideways. Sarah had been home for 3 weeks now, adjusting to civilian life after 8 years of active duty. The transition wasn't easy. After jumping out of helicopters and conducting raids in hostile territory, sitting through corporate meetings felt surreal. She walked down Pine Street toward her new job at a tech consulting firm, her leather purse slung over her shoulder. The purse had been a gift from her mother, expensive Italian leather that screamed money to anyone paying attention. The downtown lunch crowd moved around her in the usual urban rhythm. Office workers checking phones, tourists studying maps, street performers hoping for tips. Sarah's trained eyes automatically scanned the environment, cataloging potential threats out of habit. That's when she spotted him. Marcus Williams had been watching the coffee shop for 20 minutes, studying the customers who came and went. At 6 feet 2 inches and 220 pounds, he had the build of someone who used intimidation as a primary tool. Prison tattoos covered his arms, and his eyes held the cold calculation of a man who had made a career out of taking what wasn't his. Marcus had been released from Waller State Penitentiary 6 months ago after serving 4 years for armed robbery. Parole meetings and minimum wage jobs weren't paying the bills, and old habits died hard. He'd watched Sarah order her latte, noticed the expensive purse, the quality of her clothes, the way she carried herself with quiet confidence. In his experience, professional women like her rarely fought back. They handed over their belongings and called police after he was long gone. Sarah turned the corner onto 2nd Avenue, heading toward the office building where she worked. The street was busy but not crowded, perfect for Marcus's purposes. He'd done this dozens of times before. Quick, efficient, minimal witnesses. He caught up to her near the bus stop, falling into step beside her casual stride. "Nice purse," Marcus said, his voice low and threatening. Sarah glanced at him sideways without breaking pace. Her SEAL training had taught her to assess threats instantly. His posture, his proximity, the way his right hand stayed hidden in his jacket pocket, everything screamed danger. "Thank you," she replied calmly, continuing to walk. Marcus smiled. Polite responses usually meant easy targets. He'd learned to read people during his years on the street, and this woman showed no signs of alarm or aggression. "I think you should give it to me," he said, stepping closer. Sarah stopped walking and turned to face him fully. Her dark eyes met his with steady intensity. Around them, other pedestrians continued their daily routines, unaware of the confrontation developing. "I don't think so," Sarah said quietly. Marcus laughed and pulled a switchblade from his jacket pocket. The steel blade caught the afternoon sunlight as he flicked it open with practiced ease. Several nearby pedestrians noticed the weapon and quickly crossed to the other side of the street. "Listen, lady," Marcus said, pressing the knife toward her throat. "I don't want to hurt you, but I will if you make this difficult. Just hand over the purse and we're done here." Sarah felt the familiar calm that had carried her through night raids and hostile encounters overseas. Her heart rate slowed, her breathing steadied, and her mind shifted into the tactical mode that had kept her alive for 8 years. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice so quiet Marcus had to lean closer to hear her. "The only mistake would be you not giving me that purse right now," Marcus replied, pressing the knife closer to her neck. That's when Sarah moved. Her left hand shot up and grabbed his wrist, controlling the knife with the precision of someone who had disarmed insurgents in pitch-black buildings. Her right elbow drove into his solar plexus with enough force to empty his lungs instantly. Marcus gasped and tried to pull away. but Sarah's grip on his wrist was like a steel trap. She twisted his arm with the leverage techniques taught to every Navy SEAL, applying pressure to joints that weren't designed to bend in those directions. The knife clattered to the sidewalk. Marcus screamed in pain, his shoulders separated with a wet pop that echoed off the surrounding buildings. He dropped to his knees, then collapsed completely as Sarah applied a sleeper hold that cut off blood flow to his brain. The entire confrontation lasted less than 30 seconds. Pedestrians who had scattered at the sight of the knife now gathered in a loose circle around the unconscious robber. Someone had already called 911, and sirens wailed in the distance. Sarah picked up the switchblade and folded it closed, then checked Marcus's pulse to ensure he was still breathing. His shoulder would need medical attention, but he would survive, with no permanent damage. "Ma'am, are you okay?" asked the businessman, who had witnessed the entire incident. "I'm fine," Sarah replied, straightening her business suit. "Just waiting for the police to arrive." Detective Mike Rodriguez arrived with the first patrol unit, his experienced eyes taking in the scene instantly. Unconscious suspect.com victim. No visible injuries except to the perpetrator. He'd seen similar situations before, usually involving off-duty cops or military personnel. "Can you tell me what happened here?" Rodriguez asked Sarah. "This man approached me with a knife and demanded my purse," Sarah explained. "I defended myself using appropriate force." Rodriguez knelt beside Marcus, who was starting to regain consciousness. The separated shoulder was obvious, and there would likely be bruising around his throat from the sleeper hold. "Ma'am, do you have any combat training?" the detective asked. That Sarah reached into her purse and produced her military ID card. "Lieutenant Sarah Chen, United States Navy, recently separated from active duty." Rodriguez examined the ID, then looked at Sarah with new understanding. "What was your specialty in the Navy, Lieutenant?" "Special operations," Sarah replied simply. The detective smiled and shook his head. "So this guy tries to rob a Navy SEAL with a knife." "Former Navy SEAL," Sarah corrected. "But yes, that's accurate." By now, Marcus was awake but barely coherent. The paramedics arrived and began treating his dislocated shoulder while Rodriguez read him his rights. Other witnesses gave statements describing the attempted robbery and Sarah's response. "Will I need to appear in court?" Sarah asked. "Probably," Rodriguez replied. "But given the circumstances and your background, I doubt the district attorney will have any issues with your actions." This was clearly self-defense. As the ambulance loaded Marcus for transport to Harborview Medical Center, Rodriguez handed Sarah his business card. "Lieutenant, I want you to know that what you did today probably prevented this guy from victimizing other people. His record shows multiple robberies with similar tactics." Sarah nodded, but felt no satisfaction in Marcus's injury. Violence had been a tool of her profession for 8 years, but she had never enjoyed it. Every confrontation represented a failure of peaceful solutions. "Detective, I hope he gets the help he needs," she said. Prison clearly didn't address whatever drove him to this lifestyle. Rodriguez was impressed by her response. Most crime victims wanted maximum punishment for their attackers. This woman showed the kind of perspective that came from seeing real combat and understanding the complexity of human behavior. After giving her statement, Sarah continued her walk to the office. Her latte had gone cold during the incident, but she was otherwise unaffected by the confrontation. Her new co-workers noticed nothing unusual. When she arrived for the afternoon meeting, she sat through presentations about quarterly projections and market analysis, her mind occasionally drifting to the young man who was probably undergoing surgery on his shoulder. That evening, local news stations picked up the story. Navy SEAL stops armed robbery in downtown Seattle played on every channel. The security camera footage from a nearby building showed the entire incident, though the action happened so quickly that reporters had to slow it down for viewers to understand what occurred. Sarah's phone buzzed with messages from former teammates who had seen the news coverage. Most were variations of "only you would find trouble on your lunch break," and "some habits never die." The story went viral on social media within hours. Comments ranged from praise for Sarah's quick thinking to debates about violence and self-defense. Some people criticized her for using excessive force against an armed robber. Others argued that Marcus got exactly what he deserved. Sarah ignored most of the online discussion. Public opinion had never been her concern during military operations, and it wouldn't start mattering now. 3 days later, she received an unexpected visitor at her office. Marcus Williams sat in the lobby, his right arm in a sling, looking nervous and uncomfortable in the corporate environment. "I'd like to speak with Ms. Chen, please," he told the receptionist. Sarah agreed to meet with him in a conference room, curious about what he wanted to say. Up close, without the adrenaline and threat of violence, Marcus looked younger than she had initially thought. Probably mid-20s, with intelligence in his eyes that prison and street life hadn't completely extinguished. "I wanted to apologize," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And to thank you." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Thank me for putting you in the hospital." "Thank you for not killing me," Marcus replied. "I've been thinking about what happened, and I know you could have when you had me in that hold. I could see it in your eyes. You made a choice to let me live." Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation, but she saw only genuine remorse and something that might have been hope. "What are you planning to do now?" she asked. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "My parole officer says I can enroll in a community college program if I stay out of trouble. Maybe learn a trade, get a real job. That sounds like a good plan. The thing is," Marcus continued, "I've been doing this since I was 15, taking things from people, using fear to get what I want. I don't know how to be anything else." Sarah recognized the uncertainty in his voice. She'd seen it in young soldiers who questioned whether they could function outside the military structure that had defined their adult lives. "Change is possible," she said, "but it has to come from you. No one else can make that decision." Marcus nodded and stood to leave. At the door, he turned back to her. "That thing you did with the knife, where did you learn that?" 8 years of training," Sarah replied, "an experience in places where making mistakes gets people killed." After Marcus left, Sarah sat in the conference room thinking about second chances and the paths that led people to moments of crisis. Her military service had shown her that enemies were often just people who had run out of other options. 6 months later, Sarah received a graduation announcement in the mail. Marcus Williams had completed a certification program in HVAC repair and landed a job with a local contractor. The note inside was brief. "Thank you for showing me that change is possible." Sarah kept the announcement in her desk drawer, a reminder that sometimes the most important victories happened long after the immediate conflict ended. The incident on Pine Street became part of Seattle police training scenarios, used to teach officers about situational awareness and the importance of not making assumptions about victims or perpetrators. Sarah occasionally received calls from journalists wanting to discuss the story, but she generally declined interviews. She had returned to civilian life, seeking anonymity, not fame. The skills that had made her an effective Navy SEAL, quick decision-making, precise application of force, ability to remain calm under pressure, were tools she hoped never to use again outside of a military context. But as she had learned that October afternoon, some skills become so ingrained that they activate automatically when needed. The warrior mindset never truly disappears, even when the warrior tries to become something else. Sarah Chen continued her new career in technology consulting, helping companies solve complex problems with the same methodical approach she had once applied to military operations. Most of her colleagues never learned about her previous life or the incident that had briefly made her famous. She preferred it that way. The best operators, she had learned long ago, were often the ones who blended seamlessly into normal society, until the moment their specialized skills were desperately needed. On that October afternoon in downtown Seattle, those skills had prevented a crime, possibly saved lives, and maybe even set a young man on a better path. For a former Navy SEAL, trying to find her place in the civilian world, that felt like mission accomplished.